This indie studio went from making an award-winning video game to having the biggest crash out from the company's director, where they destroyed their reputation with the fan base and started using the brand itself to make these half-assed cash grab games in the most disappointing decline of a studio that I've seen so far. So I was browsing the Steam store the other day looking for the worst game on Steam, and one of them that really stood out to me was this game called Nothing, like literally nothing. It was labeled under psychological horror and it was only $1, so I decided to try it out, and based off the Steam page, you could like almost immediately tell that the game was a waste of money, because all you have to do is start playing the game and it just tells you for how long you've been doing nothing, and the moment that you move your mouse or press something on the keyboard, the game is over. On top of that, they also had another game called Something that was basically the complete opposite. The moment that you stop doing something, you lose the game. It was a quick little funny meme, you know, so I decided to look up the dev studio called Pixelatto, and I saw that very recently they also dropped a game called Boring, which kind of reminded me of the Impossible quiz from back in the day, but if it was purposely made to piss you off, so I thought it was the perfect game to play on stream with my chat and make them go through the torture with me. I only made it to level 22 before I quit. Luckily I didn't make it to the hentai part. Apparently there was a hentai part, but that was supposed to be the end of it. Pixelatto was supposed to be just some random self-aware developer who was releasing these dumb little games to make a quick buck, and that's it. But apparently there's a whole story behind this, because the more I looked into Pixelatto and what they've worked with in the past, the more I realized that this actually used to be an award-winning studio with multiple people working on a pixelated Legend of Zelda-style comedy adventure game that featured 100 different endings called Reventure. So just like the people in the Steam reviews and the official Pixelatto Discord, I was like, wait, you know, what the hell happened here? It's like if tomorrow you saw Bungie announce that they're releasing a romantic visual novel with microtransactions instead of another outer space sci-fi shooter. It's completely off-brand for them, and if you were a lifelong fan of Bungie, you would be feeling pretty confused right now, maybe even betrayed. So I did a little digging into what happened with Pixelatto Studios, but let me just step back and give you guys the whole picture, because after sitting down and playing Reventure myself, I was like, there's just no way that a studio that made a game this good has such a terrible ending, but spoiler alert, it really does. So luckily, most of Pixelatto's website is still operational, so we can get a pretty clear picture of what exactly the company used to be. They were based out in Spain, and it was founded by game director Javi Cepa back in 2014. Pixelatto started off as just a software development company, and throughout the early years, they were releasing a few apps on Steam like Auto Tile Gen, which generated 2D tile sets for game developers, Card Creator for making your very own trading cards, and they also did contract work for other companies too. But it wasn't until 2017 where we would start to see Pixelatto first dip their toes into game development, when they entered the Ludum Dare game jam and submitted what would eventually become the game Reventure. At this point, their submission was called Link's Greedy Adventure, obviously just playing off the name of Link and the Legend of Zelda. You can still find the game on itch.io and play it right now, but it was basically a completely different version of the game. At this point, it only had 6 different endings instead of 100, but the fact that it got 3rd place at the game jam was enough for Javi to want to develop the concept into a full game. So 6 months of hard work later, we got an early access version of the game called Link's Adventure, which was then changed to Reventure to avoid detection from the Nintendo copyright assassins, I'm assuming. But now Reventure had 50 different endings, so a huge upgrade from the original 6, and over time the game would evolve into the 100 endings that we got in the full release in June of 2019. So the way that Reventure worked is that it wasn't so much about rescuing the princess from the Dark Lord. You know, I guess that is one of the endings, but it's really about finding all the different ways that the story unfolds, because you as the player, technically speaking, whenever you start a brand new save file, all the playthroughs of the game are considered canonical and just keep pushing the story forward. Like for example, at one point I had an anvil fall on my head during one run, the story said that I had to take some time to heal, and now my character had an anvil stuck in his head. The action also affected the world, because next time I went through that area, it was just covered in blood. There was also a time where my character died and it was just replaced with a cat, and then at some point I was like the cat's cousin too, and then I injured my character and he was wearing a full body cast, so you know, just like the absolute wackiest storytelling I've ever seen. And the main selling point of Reventure was slowly collecting all the different endings, so I can totally see why a game like this will have such a dedicated fan base, and I can also see why it won multiple awards for how original and innovative the idea was. And you know, it was an overall successful game on Steam that eventually got ported to the Nintendo Switch as well. If you guys want to check it out for yourself, it's currently on Steam for like $1. It's a genuinely fun game. I was playing it on stream and I was like, wow, I kind of really like this. It sucks that the company just did what it did. It really does. But anyways, up to this point, everything was fine and dandy, you know? Reventure was a huge success, and the natural next step for Pixelatto would be to keep expanding on it. And this is where Javi and the Pixelatto team decided to venture into making a Reventure board game by crowdfunding it on Kickstarter. Now, I know you're probably tired of hearing this sort of situation happen over and over again when it comes to to crowdfunded and Kickstarter projects, but yeah, that turned into a nightmare situation like always. Unfortunately, Kickstarter projects almost and always end up going sideways, and well, this one was no different. The team at Pixelatto came up with Orbtail, which is basically a 20-minute funny fantasy type adventure game that was conveniently packed into a tabletop Reventure style kind of game. And with over 1,500 backers, the project raised $77,000 out of the original $20,000 that they needed, so they had more than enough money to just bring this new idea to life. I'll give you the TLDR version here, but basically the project launched in April of 2021. By April of 2023, all the manufacturing and production for the board games was completed, and they were ready to be shipped out to the backers. But because of some issues that they had with the distribution companies that they worked with, it just turned the whole deal into a hellish situation, with backers having to go through some major delays in getting their product. And even though the last update on the Kickstarter was back in 2023, people to this day are still commenting that they still haven't received their board games. So it's important to note that during this time, from 2021 to 2023, Pixelatto went from having multiple members in the studio down to just Javi. It was just him in the end, and after having to deal with all the issues with the Kickstarter and the wave of backers who were justifiably upset with how the situation was handled, bro was just mentally checked out. Like, he did not want anything to do with Pixelatto, with Orbtail, or Reventure for that matter. In fact, on the last post of the Kickstarter, he actually mentions that he just wanted to be done with all of this so that way he could focus on his brand new company, Tabletop Tech, that focuses on selling their tabletop creator software. So, going back to the software development roots that Pixelatto started with, basically what it does is that it makes it so that anybody can make a board game with it, and based off the latest update that I saw, it uses OpenAI's image generation to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to making designs. So if we go based off how things went down in the past for Javi and the Pixelatto team, we can sort of start understanding what's been going on in the present day. With Pixelatto being reduced to just one person who doesn't really seem to care about the brand behind the studio, and based off the update post on the Kickstarter where he says that he's tired of dealing with all the negativity, saying, "I rarely check the comments on the campaign page and or Discord, and when I do, I just see 'Are we there yet?' messages, which is fair on your side, but just pushes me away even more." Yeah, after seeing a message like that, I think it's safe to assume that he just does not care about the Reventure fan base at all anymore, which is totally fine in my opinion. If you want to move on to do bigger and better things, that sort of thing happens all the time. And if this was the end of it, I think everybody would be happy. We wouldn't even be talking about this today, but the fact that we are is because what we're seeing is a total crash out of the brand. I think this one comment on the Pixelatto Discord pretty much encapsulates the entire situation. It says, "Here also because of boring, the last 3 Pixelatto releases and the dev replies to reviews seem to all be fairly spiteful. Boring especially. Total speculation, but it feels like someone trying to intentionally tank the brand, and the team page on their site has been down since around November of last year. None of the most recent games are on their site either. Is this some kind of implosion?" I think that this is just the case of a studio director who fell out of love with his original work. Maybe there was some sort of internal fallout that happened within Pixelatto that we don't know about, and instead of just letting Reventure die peacefully and leave the community with a good impression of what the company and the game used to be, he's taken the opportunity to dig the game's corpse from the grave and swag it out in boring merch, hoping to get a few bucks out of it. Because even though the game is currently free to play, if you check the Steam's database, you can see that it was actually worth $7 at one point. The game Nothing has always been worth $1, and if you check Something, which this one is kind of like, I know it has to be like a meme or something, but Something at one point was priced at $99.99, so $100 for a Something game. And the thing that probably sits the worst with the community is that they started advertising their boring game in Reventure's official Steam page and on the YouTube channel as well, which is why so many fans are just absolutely confused by this, And this is just speculation here, but I think that based off how nightmarish the situation was with the Kickstarter, how people to this day still haven't received their board games and therefore are directing hate towards Javi, and the fact that he just disconnected from social media and not wanting to deal with the criticism for the delays, all of this made him bitter towards the community and actively resent them, to the point where now he's literally just shitposting on the official Pixelatto Steam store page. I don't know if the Reventure money ran out, I don't know if the Tabletop Tech software just isn't selling as well as they would have hoped, that now they feel like they have to resort to pushing these random games like this, or maybe Javi is just rolling in so much money that he's gotten to the point of just not caring about the brands that helped him get to the point where he is today. I don't really know. And again, I'm not calling out the practice of making these crappy little games, because for someone like me, for example, who didn't know about Pixelatto's past and just randomly stumbled into their new stuff, I actually thought it was really funny, and based off the reviews, a lot of people think so too, a game that was just so self-awarishly bad that it enters the realm of it being a funny joke, that's literally my kind of game. And if Javi wanted to experiment with this sort of content on a brand new account, I don't think anybody would care about it, to be honest. It's just the fact that it was done on the official Pixelatto account that just doesn't really sit well with the original fans of Reventure and for the people that had such a headache with the Kickstarter project, you know? It just feels like a developer that's actively disregarding the feelings and the passion that the fan base had for their previous award-winning game. But yeah, that's basically my whole opinion on the matter. I would love to know what you guys think about all of this. Maybe you're seeing it in a different way than I do, but yeah, that's all I really want to talk about with you guys, so thank you guys for watching.